Here is our very simple agenda. We're going to start today with Lockdown Browser. It's a standalone application, but it's also the foundation of Respondus Monitor, again, which is our automated proctoring solution, providing lots of different options for taking tests and preventing cheating. We'll share some tips, best practices, and resources, answer your questions. With both applications, you'll see both the instructor side, how to set up your tests, and then the student side, what it looks like to take a test. And we are recording the session. So if you registered, even if you leave early, you will get a recording by email automatically. So let's jump in. We're starting with Lockdown Browser again because it can be used by itself, and it's worth spending some time on because it is a really powerful custom browser for use in online testing that prevents digital cheating during online exams. Lockdown Browser is a browser application, right? It's not a plugin or just a setting that can't lock down everything students could possibly do to violate the integrity of an online exam. Now, Lockdown Browser, when it's used by itself, is typically used in proctored environments. So testing centers within proctor there, or staff, instructors in the classroom, that kind of thing. And again, it is required for the use of Respondus Monitor, but we're going to get to Respondus Monitor a little bit later. But both applications, Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor, integrate seamlessly with the major learning systems or online course platforms in use in higher education. So Blackboard, both original and ultra courses, Brightspace or D2L, Canvas, and that includes both new and classic quizzes, Moodle, and Schoology. We also support some publisher platforms like Pearson MyLab or Mastering, but those are going to be covered in separate sessions. We're not going to talk about those today. So let's start with how it looks, what it looks like to set up a test to require the use of Lockdown Browser. So that deep integration in your learning system is going to make it easy for instructors to just grab that tool and set up the test that you have in your online course already. That tool is called the Lockdown Browser Dashboard. And I'm going to walk you through that process, but I first want to show you where to find the dashboard in your course because it's in a different spot depending on what type of learning system that you're using of the ones I just named. Now, I'm going to go through and show you in each learning system. I'll do it alphabetically, so if you're a Blackboard user, listen up, you're first. But that is really the only difference across those learning systems. So whether you use Blackboard or Canvas or Moodle, the settings themselves and how Lockdown Browser works is the same. So this is just where to find the Lockdown Browser tool. So again, beginning with Blackboard, and this is the original version of Blackboard, the older course type. You're going to find the Lockdown Browser dashboard link under the Course Tools menu. And when you open it and you see the main part of the screen in the middle, that is the Lockdown Browser dashboard. And we're going to get into this part in just a moment. If you use Blackboard Ultra courses, you're going to look for the Books and Tools or Course Tools menu, and this time it's going to be on the right. When you open that, you'll see a list of all those third-party tools. Look for the Lockdown Browser dashboard link, and it's going to look the same when you open it up. If you are a Brightspace or D2L user, you're going to look in the Quizzes tool, and that secondary menu here will have a link for the Lockdown Browser dashboard, which when you open it up looks the same as all the others. If you use Canvas, you're looking in the left-hand course navigation or menu, so look for the Lockdown Browser link to open that dashboard. If you are a Moodle user, you might need to add the block or module to your course in edit mode. If you can't do that, ask your Moodle administrator. But once that block is added, you're going to see the Lockdown Browser dashboard link among all your other third-party tools. And when you open that up, surprise, it looks the same as all the others. And last but not least, if you use Schoology, your Lockdown Browser app link is going to be over in the left-hand course menu. So same as a lot of the other learning systems, just look for the link for the Lockdown Browser tool. Now again, that is how to find the Lockdown Browser tool in your online courses, depending on which learning system you're using. What I'm going to do now is jump into an actual Lockdown Browser dashboard, and we're going to talk about what's there and the settings you have for your tests. So here's the Lockdown Browser dashboard. You'll notice that when you first open it, you're going to be on this tab called Getting Started. This has an overview video, some templates where you can give directions to students. We're going to come back and talk about how to use those later, some tips for a practice quiz. And then you'll notice there's other tabs as we go from left to right that include video tutorials, guides and technical support information. And then I mentioned those publisher platforms. If you want to learn how those work with Respondus Monitor, you can find that information on the Other Systems tab. But if we go back to the main dashboard tab, this is where the settings for your tests are going to be. Now, I need to pause a moment and back up a little bit. Really, your first step for using Lockdown Browser, Respondus Monitor, and any of the tools we're going to talk about today is to create your test in your online course. This is important because you don't have to import or move your tests somewhere or bring them into a third-party tool. As long as you create them in your learning system, as long as they are a Blackboard test, a Canvas quiz, a Moodle quiz, they will appear here in this list because we integrate with the assessment tool that is in your online course. So this is going to show all of your tests and quizzes. Now, what's in those tests is up to you. Write your test questions the same way you normally would. Apply the settings for your tests in your learning system, like if you have a time limit, an availability window, numbers of attempts, how it's graded. All of those things are still going to be handled in your online course, same as you're used to now. The difference here is that we're going to apply the requirement to use Lockdown Browser, which means students won't be able to use a regular browser to take the same test. So it's really easy. Let's open up one of these practice quizzes, select the settings, and there it is. Require Lockdown Browser for this exam. It is either on or off. That's it. You could click Save and Close and you'd be done. But of course, there's some other options here. You might see some of these advanced settings and want to use those for things like how to allow access to an external website if you want to put a link to something like an ebook in your test, how to give students access to a calculator in the toolbar of Lockdown Browser. All of these settings have an explain link associated with them, and many of those go out to more detailed guides on our website. This is the Respondus support site. It's got searchable articles about all the features we're going to talk about today, some technical information, so you're more than welcome to use that to learn more. I'm not going to go through all these settings right now because it would take us too long. We're going to go ahead and take a test. So I'm going to close and save. Sorry, it's the other way around. Save and close the Lockdown Browser requirement. And what you'll see now is this practice quiz says the word required here in the Lockdown Browser column. So now I know I've set this test up correctly. That's it. Students will have to use the locked browser and not another type of browser to take this test. So let's go ahead and talk about that student's experience for a few minutes now. Students using Lockdown Browser need to have the browser installed to the device that they're going to use. This is a one-time step. It can either be done by the student themselves on their own personal devices. That includes Windows, Mac, Chromebook, and iPads. The way that a student would do it is simply follow the instructions inside the online test to download and install the browser. Part of our integration puts that download information right in the test itself. You could, though, if you wanted to, distribute a link so students can download and install the browser ahead of taking a quiz. That's fine. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that link is going to be unique to your college or university. It is not a generic browser. So if a student used Lockdown Browser in high school or they transferred from a different school, they cannot use that version of Lockdown Browser for your school's online tests. Lockdown Browser is unique to every institution that licenses it. Now, the other way Lockdown Browser can be installed to a device is if your school owns some computers. Maybe you have a lab full of Macs, maybe you loan Chromebooks to students, maybe you issue iPads to the entire nursing department. Those are typically called managed devices, and it means that your school will do the installation for the student. They can't do it themselves. That just means that someone else has to install it, but students can use it, and it works exactly the same as it would if the student installed it themselves. If you're unsure Your school's testing center has Lockdown Browser installed, I would ask the folks that manage that testing center or your IT staff, because they're the ones that are going to have to do that installation. Instructors, you don't need to worry about it. But if you're going to send students to take tests in those locations, make sure Lockdown Browser is prepared for them. Either way, Lockdown Browser works the same. The differences are going to come in which type of learning system you're using and how the student opens Lockdown Browser. So I'm going to start with the older versions of Blackboard and Canvas. These use something called manual launch. So if you give tests in Blackboard original courses, or if you give Canvas classic quizzes, students need to open Lockdown Browser first. That's the first thing they do. Not open a regular browser and log in, open Lockdown Browser. They'll be presented with your school's login page for Blackboard or Canvas, and then they'll be able to navigate and take the test. It looks a little bit like this. This is a Windows example. I've got Lockdown Browser installed. There's the shortcut for it. I'm opening the browser, navigating to my institution's login page. That's what it will present me with, and then I go find that test and take it. That's called manual launching, and again, that applies to Blackboard Original and Canvas Classic. All of our other integrations, if you are an Ultra user for Blackboard, new quizzes in Canvas, Brightspace, Moodle, Schoology, and all those publisher platforms we just talked about, Lockdown Browser is automatically launched. So this is a pretty seamless experience for students. They simply log into their online courses in a regular browser, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, it doesn't matter. And then Lockdown Browser will automatically launch when you've required it for the test. So let me show you what that looks like to a student. I'm going to take a test with Lockdown Browser live right now. So I'm logged into this course here as a student. Notice I do not have a Lockdown Browser dashboard link because that is an instructor tool only. Here is the practice quiz that we just set up with Lockdown Browser, and when I go to click on it, watch what happens. You're seeing Lockdown Browser automatically launch on my screen. Now, however the student launches it, manually or automatically, when Lockdown Browser first opens, they might be prompted to close other applications. That's by design. We don't want them screen recording or using a virtual machine or something like that. It's going to block all those things. And then the pages that the student sees are going to be the pages in your online course, right? So this happens to be a Canvas quiz, but you get the idea. It's going to work like a Moodle quiz, like a Blackboard test would normally work. We're just in a different browser here. So when this test loads, you're going to see the test looks pretty much like you would expect it to, but Lockdown Browser is the different part. So let's point out a few things that are unique to Lockdown Browser. First of all, at the top of the screen, there's no web address field. There's no menu bar. I can't open another tab or window up here on my own. Lockdown Browser is not going to let the student do any of that. They're going to be locked into this test and this test only. Notice over in the upper right-hand corner, there's a close button, but there's no minimize or resizing. So students cannot change the shape of this window or minimize it so they can see other things on their computer or device. In addition, the right-click mouse menu is not going to open. I just tried to click it and Lockdown Browser's blocking it. And I can't use things like keyboard shortcuts, command, function keys, task switching keystrokes or swiping gestures. So I can't do things like switch to another application, print the screen, copy the entire contents of this test and send it to somebody. Those things are going to be disabled when the student is in a test that requires Lockdown Browser. And it will block things like screen capture, communication tools, recording, screen sharing applications, and on and on and on. There are literally thousands of exploits that Lockdown Browser will prevent the student from doing. But they can take the test. And the test itself is going to work exactly like you'd expect it to. You can have images embedded, different types of questions. Here's an essay. We talked about external links. Those will work. If you put a link in here, you can the student can open that external web page because you provided it and use this resource to answer the test question. But external links from that website or even links to other pages would be blocked. Right? So we're keeping the student contained in the resource you want them to use. And there's ways to do that with a single page or an entire website, which might be relevant for something like an ebook. You can format, write your essay question. This test has a time limit. That is a test setting, not a lockdown browser setting. So all those things are going to work the same. And then when the student's finished, they click submit and confirm their submission. And now we can exit lockdown browser. That's it. We're back to where we started. Now, in this example, and this is slightly different because I already have Lockdown Browser installed, this is where the student might see that download link, right? If they've never used Lockdown Browser before, when they go to start a quiz that requires one, they can download and install the browser based on your requirement that they use it. So that was an overview of the student's experience using Lockdown Browser by itself. Now, just pause for a minute and talk about a couple different ways that Lockdown Browser is used. And you might have already thought of these in your own exams. In classrooms and testing centers, Lockdown Browser is often used by itself. In classes, you can give quizzes or tests and make sure students are not switching to other applications. You don't need to monitor every student's device or screen. And we even see a lot of use of Lockdown Browser in-class writing assignments using the quiz or test tool to prevent use of generative AI tools like ChatGPT. And of course, Lockdown Browser is used in thousands of proctored testing centers all over the world. But in non-proctored settings, we need to talk about something else, right? So if the student is taking tests without a proctor, and sometimes even when they are, there are some other things you might want to do to protect the integrity of the exam. And that's where we talk about Respondus Monitor. So Respondus Monitor is the name of our fully automated proctoring solution that's available on demand. That means you don't have to schedule anything. Students don't have to sign up or register or wait for a window of availability. It builds on Lockdown Browser. That's why we cover Lockdown Browser first. It's a very important part of how Respondus Monitor works. But what Respondus Monitor additionally does is it uses the student's own webcam to record them as they're taking that test. And it might record some other things too, based on what you decide to use. And all of that provides meaningful data back to the instructor. So there's a video recording, maybe of the student's webcam or their screen. You'll have data about the exam session, like milestones or timeline or flags. And we don't just give you a bunch of information you have to wade through. We give you an analysis and meaningful results. So it's efficient and effective to review this information. The overall goal, though, is to prevent cheating from happening in the first place. The use of Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor lets students know this should be a fair test environment, they should do their own work, and if they do anything dishonest, they'll be on camera or recorded doing it. So I'm going to show you how this works again from the instructor's point of view. We're going to start within that dashboard again, same Lockdown Browser dashboard. We're going to add the Respondus Monitor requirement to a test. And I'll also look at the results. That's the video and the other data that you have available after the test. All of that's done in the same dashboard. And then when we're done with that part, we're going to go take the test as a student again, so you can see exactly what that looks like. So let me switch back to the Lockdown Browser dashboard. Again, I got to this in my online course by looking for a link either in the menu or the course tools. We're going to take this practice quiz right here that we just showed you with Lockdown Browser alone. We'll open the settings again, and we'll scroll down to the options under the Respondus Monitor proctoring settings. Now, depending on what your institution has set up or has for a license, you might see two different things here. Respondus Monitor, which we're going to talk about now, and another feature called Instructor Live Proctoring, which I'm going to talk about later, so hold that thought. When you require Respondus Monitor, your institution may have created this little message for you, and then you're going to see a whole bunch of other settings. So we can talk about what these are and then go take the test. So here we require Respondus Monitor, and then we can choose to record just the student's webcam video, a webcam with a screen recording, or you could even record just the screen, and the videos will all be displayed in the post-exam results. I'll pick webcam. And then down here, there are some options when you're recording the student's webcam. There are steps that they need to go through before they begin the exam itself. And you might choose to use or not use some of these and even customize directions that go with them. I'm not going to go through them one at a time because I'll take this test as a student with everything turned on. But let me point out a few that are really important, and they're also required. The first is this webcam check. You can't turn this one off. Every student has to do it every time. And what it does is it makes sure that the student's webcam, microphone, internet connection, all that technical stuff is working properly. If anything goes wrong, this is one place that they can access troubleshooting and even 24/7 live chat support. Then at the end of this list, there's another step that you cannot turn off called face detection. Now, this requires that a student can confirm that their face is visible in the webcam video, the goal being to address any potential issues with the video before the start of the exam, like poor lighting, or even if they've covered the webcam by mistake. And there are some additional face detection options here. Now, there are some additional advanced settings here also. A few helpful features include the ability for the student to take photos of handwritten work using their webcam. This can capture up to 20 images with timestamps. And then this feature, which is relatively new, allows the student, oops, I actually should have included screen recording on this one for this because it is required, allows the student to switch back and forth between the lockdown browser test and either Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word, which is useful if you want students to do work in one of those applications. Now, this feature requires screen recording and Windows or Mac only because you're using the full desktop version of those applications. You can get more information about all these advanced features from these explain links. So right now, we're going to save and close those Respondus monitor requirements. And you'll see here that this quiz, practice quiz we just set up, now says that it requires a webcam and screen recording because that's what we just selected. So it's set up correctly, and now students will need to use Lockdown Browser and a webcam to take that test. Before I do that, though, I want to show you what this test looks like on the other side. So to find the post-exam results, the student data, the videos if you need to review them, you're going to come back to this dashboard and look under the menu for the class results. Now, one really great thing is these results are available in an average of about 5 to 10 minutes after the student has taken the exam. We process this information very quickly, so you are not waiting around for a report or data. And this, what you're seeing here, is your class roster of students, along with associated data for each student's video. The first thing you might notice is this colorful review priority column. This is a simple ranking system that puts each student's video into a high, medium, low category based on a few factors from each exam session. This is a great indicator for instructors to use to identify which sessions might or might not require deeper scrutiny. Other data points here include the duration of the video, the score or grade if that's available, and you can sort by any one of those columns as needed. I'd also like to pause a bit here and explain how Respondus Monitor doesn't just provide a bunch of data to instructors to wade through when it's processing students' videos. Respondus Monitor is designed to both collect useful information during the exam to reduce the risk to students that they'll be flagged for something that isn't cheating, and also meaningful data after the exam, as we're looking at now, to save time and effort for instructors. Now, in most cases, a cursory scan of this information is usually all that's needed. Take a quick look, you might sort by a different data point here, but it's really easy to also dig more deeply if you need to. So we can do that right now. Let's take a video that actually has a high priority and expand here right in line so we can see what that looks like. Here you get the full webcam video of the student. Click play and we can watch it. We can also skip around or watch it faster. There's a timeline below the video, so you can drag and drop to any point in time that you want. On that timeline, you might see red segments or marks where there are flagged events. They'll be listed over here on the right, along with a definition and a timestamp that lets you go right to that point in time. So we can look more closely at a segment of video instead of the whole thing. You also have something called milestones here, which is going to tell you where the student is in the test. Now, it's a really important point about Respondus Monitor. All of this information is very carefully synchronized. So we know where the student is, what they're doing. We can skip to that point in time on the timeline. You can also use these thumbnails down below the video player to scan the entire session quickly and skip to different points in time that way. And just to show you another example, if you used the screen recording feature, you'll see an additional video here. If we jump in a little bit to the video itself, you would be able to switch from the student's view to the webcam view and back really easily. And all of the flags and milestones and thumbnails are all also synchronized. So if you see the student is on question number 5 here, this is where they are, right, in the test, and this is what they're doing in the webcam video, all synchronized. There's a couple other things that get collected by Respondus Monitor depending on your settings. You might have asked the student to take a photo or show an ID, and those are high resolution images that you can review if you need to. If you ask the student to record an environment video, there may also be a pre-exam video, so other pieces that make up the bigger picture of what happened during the test. Now this video and this data is stored by default for 5 years. Your institution might have different retention policies, and that enables you to not have to rush to review the information, right? If you want to look at a student's videos at the end of the semester, that's fine. If you need to go back and look at a student's video because something happened in a future class, that is also here. This is available through this dashboard when you need it. Now, there's a couple more things to point out while we're here. Notice at the top of the student list, there's something called the sensitivity setting. This allows instructors to adjust the level of the ranking and flagging, so the priority level, review priority level, and what flags are applied to students' videos. So for example, you might choose a relaxed setting and click apply to recalculate the results in a case where maybe there's an open book exam and students are not looking at the camera the whole time and you don't want to flag them as often. It will recalculate the results for you so you can look at them differently. But the exam video and data is processed the exact same way no matter what. It's just what data you're looking at. So this is a post-exam setting. You can also go the other way to strict if you want to see more flagged events and maybe high ranking depending on what happens to the student in the student's exam sessions. And the setting also includes a feature that is on by default to flag the presence of a handheld device in the student's video. In situations where you might want to exclude this flag, like a math test with a calculator allowed, you can easily turn it off and recalculate the results. Now remember, the intent and goal of Respondus Monitor is not to have instructors watch every video of every student. The goal is to give you some high-level data you can scan quickly, look at the thumbnails, look at the flagged events, decide if you want to spend more time on any individual video. You can generally pick up quickly if something is wrong and click on to see more closely what was going on at that point in time. In fact, instructors report back to us they spend about an average of 15 to 20 seconds per student looking at data here. But you can always dig deeper if you need to, like a surveillance camera would work. The last thing I want to point out on this screen is this guide right here. In the upper right-hand corner, you have a guide to understanding these results. So everything I just talked about is explained on this page, a little key to the different pieces, as well as some frequently asked questions and answers. And the two things I like to remind everybody at this point is one of these items at the bottom. Just because a student has a flag or a high priority video does not mean they cheated. These are objective data points that you use to look at the bigger picture. And then at the very top of this page, one of the other points I like to make is up here. The goal is to prevent cheating. Remember, we said that in the first place. Not to have you watching videos and wading through data, but to let students know that it's important to do their own work, that there's a fair test environment. Don't forget they're using Lockdown Browser and they're being recorded. All right, so now we have seen what it looks like to set up a test to require the use of Respondus Monitor with Lockdown Browser. I'm now going to show you what it looks like to take the test as a student, and this will pull everything together. So just as a quick reminder, students need the same installation of Lockdown Browser. They don't need to update or install a second browser. It's the same one that we just saw before. And the same devices are supported, Windows, Mac, Chromebook, and iPad. The only thing the student needs in addition is a webcam, and that can be either the kind that's built into their device, like a internal on the laptop screen, or the kind they plug in. Respondus Monitor will detect and use whatever the student has available. So I'm switching my screen back to my student login here. I'm just going to refresh this page because we added the Respondus Monitor requirement to that practice quiz. Remember that some learning systems, most learning systems automatically launch Lockdown Browser. If you're using Canvas Classic quizzes or Blackboard Original courses, students need to manually launch the browser. Either way, it opens just like it did before. And when we begin the exam, instead of seeing test questions immediately, we're using Respondus Monitor. So we need to go through some pre-exam steps depending on the settings that you applied to this test. So all students have to review and agree to a terms of use. When you're recording the student's webcam, they'll be asked to do this required webcam check. So hi, everybody. This is making sure that my webcam, my microphone, my internet connection, system requirements, all that technical stuff is working correctly. If it's not, you'll generally see a message here that says, hey, we couldn't detect the presence of a webcam. Do you have one? Here are some steps to try to get that set up. Or the student can click this link called It's Not Working, and they can get some troubleshooting steps and advice. And they can also open our live chat if they need to. Once again, students have 24/7 by 365 live chat support available to them when they're using Respondus Monitor. Generally, that students will able to get their issues resolved in about a minute or two. Our agents are really highly trained and friendly. The only thing that our agents can't do is give students more time on the test. They're still going to have to ask you for that kind of help. Hopefully, though, they don't need this, and you'll see this It's Not Working like a couple more times. The next step, if you chose to include it, are some additional directions. Then we have some guidelines and tips that you can include for taking tests remotely. Might want to remind students of things like sit in a well-lit environment, don't use your phone. If you require that the student take a photo, this might be for identity verification purposes, accreditation, it would just snap a photo of the student with their webcam. And then that photo is part of your post-exam results. So you can take a look at it and say, yes, that is Ari, or wait, who is that person? If you ask the student to show an ID, it's very similar to the previous step, but this time you're going to write some directions up here. And can I find my ID card? I just had it. Here we go. And then we hold up and take a photo of that ID. And by the way, that becomes a high resolution photo in your post-exam results. So you can clearly see the student's name, make sure they are who they say they are. Now, this is the environment check step. It is also optional, so instructors can choose if they need this or not. Many instructors use this to just have the students take a quick video of what's around them. You want to make sure they're alone in the room. There's no post-it notes hanging from the walls on the side. Sometimes instructors have specific directions here. You allow scrap paper, maybe you want them to show that blank sheet. Or maybe you want the student to power off their mobile device on camera. So let's power that off here, turn it off, and maybe put it behind me out of reach. So you can see the phone and you're sure that I'm not going to use it during this exam. Whatever you ask the student to do, they simply record that video. When they're done, it'll play back so they can just make sure they did it correctly. And then what happens at this point, as they're watching the playback, even recording it again if they need to, is you'll notice the webcam recording icon, or this recording icon on the upper right just appeared. The student is actually on camera right now. This is important because if the student did a webcam environment check video that showed that they were alone in the room and then someone showed up to feed them answers, they'd be on camera doing it, right? So this pre-exam video is labeled in your class results, so you can skip to it right away and see if anything doesn't look right. If it does, though, it's fine. The student clicks continue, and I'm just going to make it a quick adjustment to show you the next step, which is the face detection check. So this is what the face detection check looks like when you fail face detection. I moved my camera because I did an environment video and I put it back in the wrong place. So the Respondus monitor is saying, hey, your face needs to be visible before you can continue. So watch how quickly I get my face detected, right? There it is. So now I'm back in the video. I'm sitting in the proper position. I can click continue and take the exam. So that was the pre-exam steps. I talked through them. It does not take students that long to do them, I promise. What you're seeing now is the actual online course's exam loading. This is the quiz we took earlier. I'm still in Lockdown Browser. I can't open other applications or files or all that good stuff is happening. And I'm using the webcam recording in Respondus Monitor. So I'm being recorded until I submit this test to be graded, which I'll do right now. So you can see what that looks like. And there we are. Once the student gets to this confirmation screen, your webcam recording is complete, we can close Lockdown Browser. And we're back to where we were before. So that was Respondus Monitor, the webcam recording from the student's perspective. We often talk about Respondus Monitor being used for remote exams. It supports institutions who have fully online programs, fully online classes. Exams can be delivered in a window of time, even synchronously, but taken by students remotely. But Respondus Monitor is a lot more than just a remote proctoring solution. There are a lot of examples of instructors simply giving students at-home exams to get back classroom meeting time, even in a traditional sort of on-campus situation where there's no need for remote tests because students are right there. You might want to save that classroom time for teaching or covering content. We also see a lot of use of Respondus Monitor in-class assessments, right? Where maybe there's a lower level of supervision, like it's a larger class. Respondus Monitor can be useful when instructors want students to demonstrate things on camera, like sterile techniques in health professions programs too. And we see a lot of use of Respondus Monitor in testing centers. This is especially helpful when there aren't enough proctors. You got 100 seats and one person at the door, you can't watch everyone. And Respondus Monitor can record students as long as those devices have a webcam, or if they bring their own and plug it in. This helps institutions reduce costs and staffing and still maintain the integrity of those exams. Now, Respondus Monitor also includes options to give students choices of where and when to take exams. You might have noticed it if you were looking closely at the advanced settings a bit ago. There is a webcam optional setting with Respondus Monitor that lets students choose between a proctored testing center using Lockdown Browser alone or a remote environment using Lockdown Browser and the webcam recording. Now, this might be helpful for students who prefer that on-campus environment. It might be quieter, the internet's better, or there's a few students who simply cannot come to an on-campus test location but still need to take the test at the same time as their classmates. One last thing to cover. There's another feature available with a license of Respondus Monitor called Instructor Live Proctoring. I pointed it out earlier. I promised I would cover it, and here's where it comes in. Instructor Live Proctoring allows instructors to use Lockdown Browser and watch their students in a video conferencing platform. Now, some institutions use Instructor Live Proctoring for students who are remote, for makeup exams, for accommodations, to test in a quiet environment, or because a student needs an aide who can also join by video conference. So a lot of hybrid environments use Instructor Live Proctoring and a lot of remote environments. So here's how it works. The Instructor Live Proctoring option, again, comes with a license of Respondus Monitor. It allows you to use Lockdown Browser to prevent digital cheating on the student's device and at the same time be able to watch students in your video session like Zoom or Teams. We usually say this is designed for smaller classes simply because the instructor has to watch everybody. And that might not be possible with 300 students in one Zoom session, but there's no technical limit, right? So it's really up to you. So what I'm gonna do now is pop back into my course where I'm an instructor. This is where we left off. I'm gonna open that practice quiz settings one more time. And instead of choosing Respondus Monitor, I'm going to choose the Instructor Live Proctoring option to show you what the setting looks like. Once you do that, the first prompt you will need to respond to is filling out or selecting your video conferencing platform. We have a list of what's supported here. Then you'll want to create a start code. This is going to prevent students from entering the test without being with that instructor or a proctor in that video conference. And you can also add things like extra directions here. Now, what happens next is the student would simply join the video conference like Zoom. The instructor or proctor might take attendance, give some directions, and then tell students to launch Lockdown Browser. They'll be prompted for that start code and they begin the test. The student is simply seeing the test in Lockdown Browser. The instructor is watching everybody. And the student will not have access to the video conferencing platform during this test because they're in the locked browser. So no chatting with other students, no opening other applications or files and looking up answers. There's no recording or flagging with this option. It is simply live proctoring. There are some great tips for how to run this feature here. There's also a video and a guide in the other tabs in the Lockdown Browser dashboard. All right, so we've covered all of the features and options that are part of the Respondus Monitor solution. I now want to talk about a few tips for getting started, so how you all can be successful. First things first, it might be really helpful to try it yourselves. It's one thing to watch me, it's another to get your hands on it, especially to use a real test that you're going to give someday. So this might be helpful if you want to select different settings and try them out, if you're going to allow an outside website or see how the Excel feature works. The key with this, though, is you need to use a student account, not the preview or impersonate feature that your learning system might offer you as an instructor to take a look at your tests and how they look to a student. That's not the same thing. The student account is the only way you're going to fully experience Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor. You need to be a student to see what it looks like as a student. That's why I was logging in and out of different courses with different accounts myself. You'll also want to think about how to prepare your students. So we've got a lot of resources to help you learn how the application works, and then you want to share some of those with your students. The first and maybe most useful thing we have is this sample wording. It's built right into the dashboard on that Getting Started tab under number 2, Give Instructions to Students. Each one of these links represents a different application. And you can simply copy the text you find there. You can adjust it for what your specific needs are, any contact information at your school, and then give those directions to students. Email them, post it in the course, put it in the syllabus, whatever works for you. So we've pre-written the instructions for you, but of course they're flexible. Make them work for whatever it is that you need. And then part of those instructions should absolutely include the requirement of a practice quiz. If you forget everything else I talked about today, please remember these 2 words, practice quiz. This is an opportunity for students to try Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor, to install the browser, to test their equipment in a low or no stakes environment. It also helps you set expectations with students. So leave the practice quiz open, let them try it multiple times, make sure they can do it as soon as possible. And then if they need help, they can get help. If they have questions, they can ask them. And if you see them doing things that would be considered cheating in the practice quiz video, well, that's the best time to deal with those behaviors instead of waiting for a midterm and an academic integrity violation, right? A couple of examples of a practice quiz include things like a syllabus quiz, a quick homework assignment, a 0-point or extra credit quiz. Even something like an honor code attestation is incredibly useful, where you have students read the academic integrity statement, answer some questions about it, while they're using the very tools that ensure academic integrity. The Lockdown Browser dashboard is a great place for you to refer to for resources of any kind, video guides, templates, even information on how to give a practice quiz. There is also information on our website at support.respondus.com. That includes a searchable knowledge base, ticket-based support if you have a technical issue, and then don't forget that students actually have embedded troubleshooting and live chat in Respondus Monitor. We also have a couple of additional resources that I'd like to mention because we often get questions about things like student data privacy. One of the things to keep in mind when it comes to recording students and collecting information from exam sessions is the only people that can see those videos and data are the instructors in the course, right? But if you need more information about our privacy policies, visit respondus.com/privacy. And lastly, Respondus is really committed to supporting the needs of all learners. So Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor are accessible. So please visit our accessibility pages at respondus.com/accessibility to learn more about that topic, including details on how to use things like screen readers and other assistive technologies with Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor. Phew. We covered a lot today. I understand that completely, and I'm sure you have questions. So if you think of your question later, you can write to us at training at respondus.com. You can visit our website at respondus.com/monitor. We did record today's session. You will get the recording automatically. And we're also going to answer some of your questions right now. So if you submitted a question to the questions pane in the webinar platform, check back. We might have provided you a written answer. And I'm going to call on Julia, who's another one of our trainers here at Respondus, to ask aloud some of the other questions in the time we have left. So Julia, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Ari, and hi, everyone. We've gotten a ton of questions today. We've gotten quite a few on if students are able to open and use Microsoft Excel during an exam that requires Respondus Monitor or Word. So if you want to talk about that feature, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So these features are actually relatively new. So I'm glad you asked about them because I want to show them off. So we did support something called in the category of application switching. So it means that we designed the Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor. So this is really only available in Respondus Monitor, so that students can open and use another application while they're in this test. So first things first, it requires Respondus Monitor and screen recording. So you have to pick this middle option or the screen only, but we're going to talk about webcams right now. Then go down to the bottom under advanced settings, and you're going to see this allow switching to another application. Right now, we support Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word. You can pick one or the other. Now, the way this works is the instructor would design the test so that the student needs to do something in either an Excel file or a Word document. You might want them to write an essay or look at a data set. You can either embed the file, Excel or Word, in the test itself. Maybe you want to say, here's the essay prompt, it's in a full document. Maybe you want to say, here's a data set I want you to work with. Or when the student uses Respondus Monitor and Lockdown Browser with this feature on, there will also be a button in the toolbar, like kind of up here of Lockdown Browser, that lets them open either Excel or Word. So they can start with a blank file, or you can give them a file. What this lets them do is switch to Excel or Word from the Lockdown Browser window, but it won't let them go anywhere else. And that's really important. This is not opening up Lockdown Browser for every application out there. What's the point of using Lockdown Browser if we do that? This is just letting the student go to Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. So it's a great way to give students more options and instructors more ways to assess student learning. And they're relatively new, so that's why there's still a little tag on them. And there's a great explain link article here about how they work and what it looks like.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ari. We've also, while you're there, have gotten several questions on if it's possible for students to show written work that they've completed during the exam for instructors to review.
Yes, so there is this feature here. I mentioned it really quickly, but it's called Show Your Work. Again, this is for Respondus Monitor. You need a webcam, either of these two options. And what that will do is it'll have the student use their webcam to take photos of handwritten work. So maybe I'm allowed to use a whiteboard and do calculations, or I need to draw a diagram on a piece of paper. Lockdown Browser doesn't let students upload files, right? Because it's Lockdown Browser. So the only way a student could do this previously is to actually like hand in that piece of paper or take a picture of it later, which, kind of exposes dishonest work in a way. With this feature, the student is still in the exam session. They just finished the test. The webcam stops recording, but it's going to prompt the student to take these photos. The photos, there can be up to 20 of them, and then they wind up looking like this in the results. I didn't have an example of the results. Sorry, I thought I did. The student would basically just take the pictures, and then they would show up in the results. And if I have an example, I will try to find you one, but I might not. This is a relatively new feature too, and it's really great for things like those diagrams, right? And drawings and things like that. So sorry, I wasn't prepared with an example of that. I should have been. But if I find one, I'll show you. I think there's one here. Nope. Psych. I will find one if someone wants to see it. But Julia, I'll let you continue answering or asking other questions while I look.
Awesome. We did get quite a few questions about device requirements. I'm just wondering if maybe you can show a resource that might be helpful really quick.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So students do need to use a supported device, and there are 4 categories of those devices. It's Windows, Mac, Chromebook, and iPad. But if you need more detail than that, like which version of Windows, I would recommend go to, I'll show you the path, respondus.com, then click on support here in the upper right. And then this is our knowledge base, right? This is the place where all those articles of the explain links live. If you go to the lockdown browser section, it's the very first article. What are the computer requirements for lockdown browser? And it will go into more technical detail than I even understand for each type of device and operating system. So again, that is from the support section of our website. Click on knowledge base, and it's the very first article.
Awesome. I know we're over time. I'm going to sneak in one more question since it's come up a few times. There are also a few questions back into the kind of advanced settings about students being able to take the exam either with a webcam or with just lockdown browser in a proctored lab. Can you maybe talk about that a little further?
Yeah, so that is another option that would allow you to use Respondus Monitor, webcam, or screen recording. And it's this option here that says, allow this exam to additionally be delivered in a proctored lab. Why would you use this? Well, maybe you have a policy at your institutions that students do not have to come to campus to take tests. You allow them to do this remotely, or the other way around, right? They have to come to campus, and you need to make an exception for a student who can't meet that requirement. Sometimes we know institutions that set up every single test for this option because they want to make sure that there's enough flexibility for students to either come to campus where there's a quiet location, maybe the internet is better on campus than it is where they live, or there's some students who are just too far away, and that commute or the parking and the traffic would be too much of a hardship, right? So we want to give them some options. The way it works is you set up one test, you check this setting, and then you're going to be prompted to enter a password or access code. In this case, in Canvas, classic quizzes, it'll show up here, but it might be different in your learning system. And then you would create a password here. Then what happens is when the student goes to take this test, any student, the first screen they see will ask them, are you using a webcam? Or are you in a proctored setting? If they say webcam, then they just go and use Respondus Monitor and they get recorded exactly what I showed you before. If they choose they're in a proctored setting, then they'll be prompted for this password. So whomever is the proctor, might be you, the instructor, might be the testing center staff, they'll need to have this password to let the student in. So that takes the place of the recording. So one setting, 2 options, and it's way down here in the advanced settings for Respondus Monitor, and it's called allow this exam to be delivered in a proctored lab.
Great, thank you, Ari. I think then I'll just let you wrap up.
All right, well, those are great questions, everyone, and I know there were more we probably didn't get a chance to get to. Our team was working hard. Check the questions pane in case something came to you in writing. If you didn't hear or get the answer to your question, you can email us, training@respondus.com. You will also get an email from that address with the video recording of today's session, so you can hit reply to that also. So thank you, Julia, for your help, and thank you, everyone, for your time. I hope it was a really helpful session, and have a great rest of your day.